He called it a vacation. I called it the only thing standing between Helliand Group and regulatory hell. When Director Holt canceled my Paris trip to save €9,000, I didn't argue. I just sat back and watched the calendar tick toward disaster. 3 days after the deadline passed, we were hemorrhaging €100,000 every 24 hours. The EU doesn't send reminders. Neither did I. Sometimes the most devastating checkmate is simply letting your opponent play himself into extinction. Monica Dale. That's my name. Though after 18 years at Helliand Group, I'd become more of a function than a person. Senior Regulatory Operations Supervisor, the title that kept our European market from imploding into a bureaucratic nightmare. 46 years old. No husband to complicate my schedule. No kids to guilt me about the late nights spent decoding French compliance updates. Just me, my work, and the intricate dance of international licensing that I'd perfected like a Swiss watchmaker. Then Zachary Holt arrived. 3 weeks. That's all it took for him to decide he understood my job better than I did. Fresh from some Silicon Valley startup where disruption was gospel and regulations were just suggestions. He swept into our Boston headquarters like a hurricane in an Armani suit. Mid-30s, Harvard MBA still crisp on his LinkedIn, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having watched a multi-million-dollar operation crumble because someone forgot to file paperwork in triplicate. Our first department meeting was on a Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. I remember because I'd just gotten off a call with our Paris liaison about the upcoming renewal. Same process every year. Fly to Paris. Wine and dine the officials at the Commerce Ministry. Hand-deliver our applications. Smile through their complaints about American corporate arrogance, and walk out with another year of operating privileges worth roughly $30 million in quarterly revenue. Dale, Zachary said, not even looking up from his tablet. First name basis was apparently beneath him. This Paris trip. Cancel it. The conference room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. The EU licensing renewal, I clarified, though I knew exactly what he meant. Luxury travel disguised as legacy procedures. He finally looked at me, blue eyes sharp with the zealotry of cost-cutting. $9,000 for what? To hand-deliver papers we can email. This isn't the 20th century. I could have explained. Could have told him about the French bureaucrats, who still insisted on wet signatures, about the unwritten rule that skipping the annual pilgrimage meant your files mysteriously ended up at the bottom of the pile. Could have mentioned that one delayed renewal in 2008 cost us 4 contracts and a class action lawsuit. Instead, I said, understood. The word tasted like ash, but I swallowed it with the same practiced calm I'd perfected through 3 mergers, 5 CEOs, and countless meetings where men half my age explained my job to me. Good. He moved on to his next target. Something about digitalizing our filing system. Talia here will be taking over the EU compliance coordination. Fresh perspective. You understand. Talia Chen smiled nervously from across the table. 24, fresh from Wharton. Still had that new hire shine that hadn't been dulled by reality yet. She'd asked me last week what GDPR stood for. Now she was my replacement. Of course, I said, gathering my papers with deliberate slowness. I'll forward her all the relevant documentation. Excellent. Efficiency. People. That's the new mandate. Zachary dismissed us with a wave, already scrolling through his next PowerPoint of revolutionary ideas. I walked back to my office, the one with the view of the harbor I'd earned through nearly 2 decades of keeping this company legally afloat. My assistant, Jerome, looked up from his desk with raised eyebrows. So, he asked. The Paris trip is canceled, I said, pulling out my phone. And I'm apparently redundant. Monica, no, he can't just... He can, and he did. I smiled, the kind of smile that made Jerome lean back in his chair. Send all EU regulatory files to Talia Chen. Everything. Make sure she has complete access. But the renewal deadline is no longer my concern. I paused at my office door. Oh, and Jerome, make sure everything is documented. Every email, every file transfer, every access log, complete transparency. Monica, what are you doing? I thought about the post-it note already on my monitor. April 15th. The date that would either be another successful renewal or the beginning of Zachary Holt's education in international commerce law. My job, I said. Exactly as directed. The thing about being erased is that you become a ghost with perfect vision. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched my 18 years of work get parceled out like estate sale items. My access to the EU compliance portal, revoked. My standing meetings with legal, reassigned. My direct line to our Paris contacts, redirected to Talia Morrison, who thought the CE mark was some kind of designer label. I didn't fight it. I became the most cooperative ghost in corporate history. Every evening at 6:30 p.m., after most of the department had fled to their spin classes and happy hours, I sat in my office with the door closed and a portable hard drive hidden in my purse. 18 years of emails, contracts, correspondence with the French Commerce Ministry, all of it copied with the methodical patience of someone who'd learned long ago that documentation was ammunition. "You're still here." Zachary appeared in my doorway one Thursday evening, clearly surprised to find anyone working past his mandated work-life balance hours. "Just organizing old files," I said, closing my laptop with practiced calm, making sure everything's properly archived before the transition. "That's what I like to see. Team player mentality." He leaned against the doorframe, trying for casual authority. "You know, Monica, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's about modernization, efficiency." "Of course." I slipped the hard drive into my purse, movement smooth as water. "Change is inevitable." "Exactly. And between you and me," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "the board loves the cost savings. That Paris trip alone, $9,000 we can reinvest in digital infrastructure." "Impressive," I said, because it was expected. He left with the satisfied air of a man who'd just been magnanimous to the fallen. I waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out a yellow post-it and wrote April 15th, 23 days. I stuck it to the edge of my monitor, a small flag marking the approaching cliff. Talia stopped by the next morning, all nervous energy and misplaced enthusiasm. "Monica, hi. I was wondering if you could walk me through the renewal process. Zachary said you'd have time to mentor me through the transition." Mentor. The word sat in my mouth like spoiled milk. "Of course," I said, pulling up the files. "Here's everything you need. The portal login, the contact list, the filing requirements. It's all very straightforward." "Oh, good. I was worried it would be complicated," she laughed, a tinkling sound that belonged in a coffee shop, not a regulatory office. "So I just upload the documents." "That's right. The portal opens on April 1st. You have until midnight Paris time on April 14th to submit everything." "Paris time," she frowned. "Why not Eastern?" "Because the French Commerce Ministry sets the deadlines, not us." "Oh, right." She made a note in her designer planner. "And they'll send reminders." I smiled, soft as silk. "The French government doesn't send reminders. Talia, they send fines." "Got it." Another note, another giggle. "This is so much easier than I thought it would be. Zachary was right. You've been overcomplicating things." "Perhaps I have," I agreed, watching her practically skip back to her cubicle. Jerome appeared in my doorway moments later, face tight with suppressed rage. "You're really going to let her handle this?" "I'm following Director Holt's instructions to the letter." I turned back to my screen, where I was composing a carefully worded email. "I'm being a team player. Monica." "Did you complete those file transfers I requested?" He sighed. "Yes, everything's been sent. Copied to Zachary, Talia, and legal. Just like you asked. Full transparency." "Perfect." I hit send on my email, a helpful summary of all renewal requirements, sent to Talia with Zachary copied. "Keep the confirmation receipts, all of them." "You're planning something." "I'm planning nothing." I gestured to my empty desk, cleared of the personal photos and awards that once marked this space as mine. "I'm a ghost, Jerome. Ghosts don't plan. They just watch." That night, I went home to my Back Bay apartment and poured myself a glass of wine. Good wine, a Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion, on my laptop. I pulled up the portable drive and reviewed my insurance policy, every email where Zachary had removed my access, every document showing my attempts to help, every timestamp proving I'd been cut out of the process. April 15th, 22 days. I raised my glass to the Boston skyline, to the lights of a city that ran on careful documentation and proper procedure, Somewhere across town, Zachary Holt was probably celebrating his cost-cutting genius with craft cocktails and startup stories. Let him celebrate. Ghosts had all the time in the world. The quarterly finance meeting arrived like a coronation. Zachary had prepared a 12-slide presentation titled Operational Excellence Through Strategic Cost Optimization. I sat in the back row, invisible among the middle managers, watching him command the room with the confidence of someone who'd never seen a European regulatory audit. As you can see, he clicked to a slide showing a neat bar graph. We've already achieved significant savings in Q1. This includes the elimination of unnecessary travel expenses. Click, a photo of the Eiffel Tower with a red X through it. Someone actually laughed. $9,000 saved by canceling a glorified vacation disguised as a business trip. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. CFO Patterson nodded appreciatively, making notes on his tablet. The old way of doing business, Zachary continued, his laser pointer dancing across the screen, relied on expensive traditions and redundant processes. We're bringing Helliand into the 21st century. Impressive work. Holt, Patterson said. The board will be pleased. What about the compliance aspects? Fully modernized. Everything's digital now. My team has streamlined the entire process. He glanced around the room, his eyes sliding over me like I was furniture. We're proving that efficiency doesn't require excessive spending. I shifted in my seat, feeling the weight of my phone in my pocket. 15 days until the deadline. The post-it on my monitor had become my morning meditation, a yellow square of patience. After the meeting, the break room buzzed with excitement. Zachary Holt, the golden boy who'd trimmed the fat, the innovator who'd challenged the old guard. I poured myself coffee and listened to the chatter. Each compliment another brick in the wall he was building around himself. Monica, Sarah from accounting touched my arm. You okay? I know this must be hard, watching him get credit for doing his job. I smiled, the coffee bitter on my tongue. I'm fine, Sarah. Change is good for the company. She frowned, unconvinced. But you've been handling EU compliance for 18 years, and now Talia Morrison is handling it. Evolution of the workplace. Talia Morrison. Sarah's frown deepened. The girl who asked me if euros were the same as pounds. She's learning, I said, because what else was there to say? That afternoon, I received an email from our Paris liaison, Henri Dubois. Subject line, concern regarding upcoming renewal. Madam Dale. It read in his careful English. I have not received the usual scheduling request for our annual meeting. As you know, the ministry prefers to review applications in person. I hope all is well. The deadline approaches. I stared at the email for a long moment. Henri had been my contact for 12 years. He'd guided me through the labyrinth of French bureaucracy, introduced me to the right people, ensured our applications never mysteriously vanished into the void. My finger hovered over the forward button. It would be so easy to send this to Talia, to Zachary, to wave this red flag in their faces. Instead, I typed a brief reply. Thank you for your concern. Henri, please direct all future correspondence regarding the renewal to Talia Morrison CC'd here. She is now handling this process. Send. You forwarded Henri's email. Jerome stood in my doorway the next morning, disbelief etched on his face. Of course, I'm not involved in EU compliance anymore, remember? But he's warning them. He's practically spelling out what's going to happen. And now they have that warning, in writing, with timestamp. I pulled up my sent folder, showing him the forwarded email. Full transparency, as requested. Jerome shook his head. They won't understand what he's really saying. Talia thinks the ministry prefers means it would be nice if... That's not my problem to solve anymore, Monica. Did you see Zachary's presentation yesterday? I interrupted, turning my monitor so he could see the downloaded slides. Slide 7 was particularly interesting, the one where he takes full credit for the new streamlined process. Jerome leaned closer, reading. His face went pale. He's putting his name on everything, taking ownership of the entire EU compliance system. In writing, in a presentation to the executive team, recorded in the meeting minutes, I closed the file, satisfied. A man who takes credit takes responsibility, That's basic physics. And the deadline? I glanced at my post-it. 13 days. The portal's been open for 2 weeks. I'm sure Talia has everything under control. That evening, I saw Talia at the coffee machine. Her usual brightness dimmed. Oh, Monica. Hi, quick question. I got this weird email from someone named Henri. He keeps mentioning meetings and reviews. But I thought everything was digital now. What did Zachary say when you asked him? She bit her lip. He said to ignore it. That the French are just stuck in their old ways. But, nothing. I'm sure it's fine. She forced a smile. I uploaded everything to the portal last week. It's all there. I nodded, stirring my coffee slowly. Good. Always important to meet deadlines. Right. That's what I figured. As long as it's submitted on time, we're good. I watched her walk away, designer heels clicking on the tile floor. 13 days. In my office, the post-it note waited like a patient yellow prophet. That night, I updated my resume for the first time in 18 years. Not because I needed to. The headhunters had been circling since word got out about my transition, but because it felt like closing a chapter. Senior Regulatory Operations Supervisor, Heliand Group, 2007 to 2025. 18 years reduced to a single line. My phone buzzed. Another email from Henri, now copying Talia and Zachary. Final reminder, Ministry strongly recommends in-person review for applications of this magnitude. Please confirm your travel arrangements. I archived it without responding. The ghost was done sending warnings. Now she would simply wait for the haunting to begin. April 18th, 3 days late. I arrived at 7:45 a.m. as usual, coffee in hand, watching the morning rush of employees who had no idea their European operations were now technically illegal. The post-it on my monitor had been replaced with a new one, day 3. My email pinged at 8:15 a.m. From Direction Générale des Entreprises to Regulatory at Heliand Group, com, CCM, Dale at Heliand Group, com, T, Morrison at Heliand Group, com, Z, Holt, Heliand Group, com, subject urgent, license expiration notice, penalty assessment. The email was in French, naturally, formal government French that would make Google Translate weep. I read it twice, savoring each precisely worded sentence like aged wine. Your operating license for European Union commercial activities expired 72 hours ago, as per Regulation EC. No. 765, 2008, failure to renew results in immediate penalty assessment of $100,000 per day, retroactive to date of expiration. All commercial activities must cease until compliance is restored. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. The beauty of French bureaucracy was its complete indifference to excuses. They didn't care if you were a Fortune 500 company or a corner shop. Rules were rules, and the French had been perfecting the art of administrative punishment since Napoleon. 9:22 a.m. Talia burst through my door without knocking. Face flushed, designer blazer askew. Monica. Oh my God. I need your help. This email. I can't read it, but it looks bad and... I'm sorry, I said, not looking up from my screen. I'm not authorized to handle EU compliance matters. You should speak with Director Holt. But it's in French, and there are all these numbers and... Perhaps Google Translate, I suggested mildly. I believe Zachary mentioned something about digital solutions. She made a sound somewhere between a sob and a squeak before fleeing. I counted to 30 before pulling up our internal systems. Sure enough, warning flags across every European portal. Access denied. License invalid. A beautiful cascade of digital dominoes falling exactly as prescribed by regulations I'd memorized a decade ago. 10:45 a.m. Jerome appeared, eyes wide. Logistics just called. Our entire shipment to Marseille has been held at port. Customs won't release it without valid licensing. How unfortunate, I said, typing a routine report as if the building wasn't on fire around us. Monica, this is serious. That's 3 million in products sitting in containers. Yes, it is serious, which is why I'm sure Director Holt is handling it personally. I glanced at my screen. Isn't he the one who streamlined our compliance process? Jerome stared at me. You knew this would happen. I knew the deadline was April 15th. Everyone knew. I sent multiple emails. It's all documented. Where's Talia? Last I saw, she was running toward the bathroom. Stress is hard on the digestive system. 11:30 a.m. The first domino hit the executive floor. An emergency meeting was called, scheduled for noon. Mandatory attendance for all department heads and senior staff. I wasn't invited, technically being neither anymore, but Jerome forwarded me the invite anyway. You should be there, he said. I'm not authorized. Cut the shit, Monica. You're the only one who can fix this. No, I corrected him. I was the only one who could prevent this. That position was eliminated, remember. By 11:45 a.m., the full scope was becoming clear. The European CRM system had locked us out. Data protection regulations didn't play around with unlicensed operators. Customer emails bounced back with automated warnings about invalid commercial status. Our German office called in a panic, unable to process orders. I updated my post-it day 300,000. At noon, I walked past conference room A, where raised voices leaked through the supposedly soundproof glass. Zachary's distinctive baritone, usually so confident, cracked like a teenager's. Through the window, I could see him gesturing wildly at a screen showing error messages in multiple languages. Talia sat at the far end of the table, mascara streaking her cheeks. Laptop open to what looked like Google Translate's attempt at the penalty notice. The French government had sent 3 follow-up emails, each more severe than the last. The final one included the word criminal. Even Google couldn't mistranslate that. I continued to the break room, where a cluster of employees whispered over their sandwiches. I heard it's 100,000 euros per day. A Paris office won't even answer our calls. Zachary's in there screaming about sabotage. I poured myself tea, Earl Grey, and returned to my office. On my desk was a handwritten note from Patterson, the CFO. Monica, need to speak with you urgently. Please come to CRA. I filed it carefully in my drawer. Next to the printed copies of every email I'd sent warning about the deadline, the ghost wasn't ready to materialize yet. Let them sweat through the afternoon. Feel the weight of those mounting penalties. Understand that some vacations weren't vacations at all. My phone buzzed, a text from Henri in Paris. I tried to warn them. Monica, the ministry is not sympathetic. Your young replacement hung up on Deputy Director Rousseau when he called to explain the severity. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The meter was running, 4,166 per hour, and somewhere in conference room A, Zachary Holt was learning that efficiency without expertise was just another word for disaster. Day 3, the ghosts were coming home to roost, and they were speaking French. 2:47 p.m. The first crack appeared in the form of Brad from logistics, who practically kicked down my door. Monica, Jesus Christ, we need you. The Marseille shipment, it's not just being held. They're threatening to auction it off if we don't provide valid documentation within 72 hours. That's concerning, I said, fingers never pausing on my keyboard. What does Director Holt say? Holt? Brad laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. Holt's locked in legal, trying to figure out if we can sue the French government. He actually asked if we could claim force majeure against a missed deadline. That's what legal said. Then they asked who was responsible for the renewal. Brad slumped against my doorframe. Monica, that shipment is worth $3.2 million. Henderson's breathing down my neck. The client's threatening to pull their entire contract. I'm not authorized. Stop. He held up a hand. Just stop. We both know you're the only person in this building who understands French commercial law. Hell, you probably have their deputy minister on speed dial. Had, I corrected. Director Holt felt personal relationships were an outdated business practice. Brad's face went through several shades of red before settling on a purple that couldn't be healthy. That stupid son of a... Is there anything else? I interrupted. I have reports to finish. He left, but the parade had only begun. 3:12 p.m. brought Sarah from accounting, pale as copy paper. The European revenue stream just froze. Every transaction since April 15th has been flagged as invalid. Monica, we're talking about 11 million in suspended funds. How unfortunate. Unfortunate, her voice pitched high. The auditors are going to crucify us. This is Sarbanes-Oxley territory, material misstatement of financial position. I pulled up my archived emails, the ones warning about renewal deadlines, and briefly considered showing them to her. But no, the ghost remained invisible. 4:25 p.m. The news had spread like wildfire through the building. I could track its progress by the increasing foot traffic past my office, the whispered conversations, the occasional muffled shout from the executive floor. Someone had translated the full penalty notice and posted it on the break room bulletin board. $100,000 per day, compounding. We were now at $400,000 and counting. My desk phone rang. Internal number, executive floor. Monica Dale, I answered, professional as always. Monica, Patterson's voice, tight with controlled panic. We need you in the boardroom, now. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Director Holt made it clear that... Fuck what Holt made clear. The CFO never swore. Never. Get up here before we lose another million. I'm not authorized to work on EU compliance matters, I said evenly. That responsibility belongs to Talia Morrison, under Director Holt's supervision. Silence. Then, Morrison sedated in the medical office. She had a panic attack when the German office started forwarding angry client calls. And Holt? A pause. Holt is indisposed. Indisposed. He's in the bathroom, has been for 40 minutes. We think he's either sick or hiding. I glanced at my post-it. Day 3. 400,000 has. I'm afraid I can't help without proper authorization. Perhaps Director Holt could send written confirmation that I'm being reinstated to handle EU compliance. Are you seriously? Patterson caught himself. What do you want? Monica. I want nothing, I said truthfully. I'm simply following company protocol. Director Holt was very clear about efficiency and modernization. I wouldn't want to undermine his vision. I hung up softly, then forwarded Patterson's email request to my personal account. Documentation, always documentation. 5:43 p.m. The exodus began. Employees fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, unwilling to stay for whatever fresh hell tomorrow would bring. I watched from my window as Zachary Holt stumbled to his Tesla. Suit jacket missing, tie askew. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. Jerome appeared with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Figured you'd still be here. Where else would I be? I accepted the glass, savoring the burn. This is the most excitement we've had in years. The EU portals completely locked us out, he said, settling into my guest chair. It tried to hack in, actually used the word hack in an official email. But the French built that system like a digital Maginot line. Except this one works. Yeah, he raised his glass. To ghosts who know when to stay dead. We drank in companionable silence, watching the sun set over Boston Harbor. Somewhere across the Atlantic, French bureaucrats were probably enjoying wine of their own, indifferent to the chaos they'd unleashed on an American company that thought it could ignore their rules. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that I recognized anyway. Zachary's personal cell. Need to talk, please. I deleted it without responding. The ghost had no interest in manifestation. Not yet. Let him marinate in the mess he'd made. Feel the weight of every euro bleeding from the company coffers. So, Jerome said eventually, what's your endgame here? I smiled, refilling our glasses. I don't have an endgame. I'm not authorized to have one. I'm just an observer, watching Director Holt's efficient new system work exactly as designed. Monica. Did you know, I interrupted, that after 72 hours of non-compliance, the French can freeze all assets associated with the violating entity, not just European assets, all of them. Jerome's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. You're kidding. Article 47 of the Commercial Code, very clearly stated, in French, of course. Of course. He drained his glass. How long until? Oh, about 19 hours. I glanced at my watch. Give or take. The building was nearly empty now. Just security and the cleaning crew, and 2 ghosts drinking whiskey while an empire crumbled in multiple languages. Tomorrow would bring fresh panic, new crises, desperate attempts to staunch the bleeding. But tonight, I sat in my earned office with my earned view, watching the lights of Boston twinkle like stars, each one representing someone who understood that some rules couldn't be disrupted, some traditions existed for reasons, and some vacations were anything but. Day 3, $400,000, And counting. The meter was running, and Monica Dale was off the clock. 8:05 a.m. Day 4. The executive boardroom looked like a war zone. I stood in the doorway, summoned by a direct order from CEO Marcus Whitman himself, taking in the scene. Coffee cups scattered like casualties, papers strewn across the mahogany table, and in the center of it all, a projection screen showing numbers that would make any CFO weep. 2.1 million in fines, frozen assets worth $47 million, 3 major clients threatening litigation. Monica. Whitman's voice cut through the chaos. At 62, he'd weathered every crisis from the dot-com bubble to the pandemic, but I'd never seen him look this haggard. Sit. I chose a chair at the far end, maintaining my ghost status even in corporal form. The rest of the board was there. Patterson, legal, operations, even members who usually only appeared for quarterly meetings. Notably absent Talia Morrison, still sedated, and Zachary Holt, who sat in the corner like a scolded child. His revolutionary confidence evaporated. "Let me be clear," Whitman began, his Boston Brahmin accent sharp as winter. "We are hemorrhaging 100,000 euros every 24 hours. Our European operations are paralyzed, and apparently, the only person who could have prevented this was systematically removed from her position." His eyes found Zachary, by someone who thought a $9,000 trip was too expensive. "Sir, Zachary started. "You'll speak when asked." Whitman turned to me. "Monica, can this be fixed?" I opened my laptop, pulling up files I'd prepared at 6 a.m., knowing this moment would come. The French Commerce Ministry has a 72-hour grace period for emergency reinstatement. That window closes in approximately 16 hours. What do we need? A senior representative must appear in person at the ministry in Paris with complete documentation, letters of apology from executive leadership, and full payment of all penalties. I clicked to the next slide. Additionally, we'll need to provide a compliance guarantee, essentially a promise that this will never happen again, backed by a substantial deposit. "How substantial?" Patterson asked, though his face suggested he already knew it would hurt. 5 million euros. The room erupted, board members shouting over each other, accusations flying like shrapnel. Through it all, I remained silent, watching Zachary shrink further into his chair. "Enough!" Whitman's fist hit the table. "How did this happen? I want the truth, and I want it now." General Counsel Margaret Chen cleared her throat. "I've reviewed the documentation. On March 15th, Director Holt canceled the annual Paris compliance trip. He then removed Monica from the EU renewal process and assigned it to Talia Morrison. And Ms. Morrison's qualifications: an MBA from Wharton and 6 months' experience in our Cleveland office. For managing 47 million in European operations, Whitman's voice could have frozen hell. "Holt, explain yourself." Zachary stood, his startup swagger completely dissolved. I believed we could modernize the process. Digital transformation. The trip seemed like an unnecessary expense. Unnecessary. Whitman held up a paper. "This is from the French deputy minister. Do you know what it says? It says we insulted them by sending a junior employee's digital submission instead of following established protocols. It says we showed typical American arrogance. It says they're considering a full audit of our operations going back 5 years. I couldn't have known. That's correct. I spoke for the first time since sitting down. You couldn't have known, which is why you should have listened to someone who did. All eyes turned to me. "Monica," Patterson said carefully, "do you have documentation of your attempts to prevent this?" I smiled, opening a folder I'd brought. Email dated March 15th, warning about the critical nature of the Paris trip. Email dated March 20th, forwarding French liaison concerns. Email dated April 1st, reminding about the portal opening. Email dated April 10th, final warning about approaching deadline. All copied to Director Holt and Ms. Morrison. I spread the printed emails across the table like tarot cards revealing a very expensive future. "You knew this would happen," Zachary accused, voice cracking. "You let it happen." "I followed your instructions precisely," I replied. "You wanted efficiency, you wanted digital solutions, you wanted to eliminate unnecessary expenses. Congratulations, Director Holt, you've achieved all 3. This is sabotage. This is documentation." Margaret Chen had been reading the emails. Monica did everything required of her position. She warned you, provided all necessary information to your chosen replacement, and stepped aside as ordered. She looked up. Legally speaking, Director Holt bears full responsibility. So fix it, Whitman ordered, looking at me. Take the next flight to Paris. Do whatever's necessary. I'm afraid I can't, I said quietly. I'm no longer authorized to handle EU compliance. That would require reinstatement to my previous position, with appropriate authority and compensation. The room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. What are you asking for? Whitman asked. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I'm simply stating facts. The person responsible for this situation should be the one to fix it. That would be Director Holt. I don't speak French, Zachary burst out. I don't know their systems, I can't. Then perhaps, I suggested mildly, you shouldn't have taken ownership of processes you didn't understand. Whitman looked between us, the calculation clear in his eyes. The company was bleeding money, clients were fleeing, and the solution sat at his table, calmly waiting for justice to arrive. Holt, he said finally, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't. I can and I did. Margaret, make sure his signature is on every document accepting full responsibility. Whitman turned to me. Monica, what do you need? I closed my laptop, stood, and pulled a sealed envelope from my bag. Nothing. Nothing. I placed the envelope on the table. My resignation, effective immediately. I've already accepted a position with Thornfield Associates. They were very impressed by my 18 years of maintaining flawless EU compliance. The boardroom erupted again, but I was already walking toward the door. Behind me, Whitman's voice boomed. Monica, wait, whatever they're offering, we'll double it. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the chaos. Zachary being escorted out by security, board members frantically calculating how to save their European operations, the beautiful, terrible mathematics of consequence. With all due respect, Mr. Whitman, I said, I don't work for companies that consider my expertise a vacation. I left them with their €2.1 million problem and 16 hours to solve it. In my office, I packed the last of my things, leaving the post-it note on my monitor, a small yellow flag marking where efficiency met reality and lost. Jerome waited by the elevator, holding a banker's box of my possessions. So that's it. You're really leaving. My flight to Paris leaves at 9:30 tonight, I said, but I'll be flying first class to my new office, Thornfield's European headquarters. And Heliand. I shrugged. They'll figure something out, or they won't. Either way, it's no longer my concern. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of the boardroom, where very expensive lessons were being learned in multiple languages. Some checkmates took 18 years to set up, but they were worth the wait. 10:42 a.m. The lobby of Heliand Group was in chaos. Security had already processed Zachary's exit. I watched from the mezzanine as he was escorted out with a single banker's box, his Tesla keys confiscated pending the company car audit, the startup king reduced to calling an Uber, his revolution ending not with innovation but with security protocols. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Whitman, Patterson, even Margaret from legal. I silenced it, focusing instead on the email from Thornfield Associates confirming my start date, triple my Helian salary, full European authority, and an office overlooking the Seine. Sometimes revenge came with a view. Ms. Dale, a security guard approached. Mr. Whitman requests your immediate presence. He says it's about the final documentation. Tell Mr. Whitman I'll be in my office for another 15 minutes. If he needs documentation, he can come to me. The guard looked uncertain, but relayed the message. 3 minutes later, Whitman appeared, followed by Patterson and Margaret, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, coming to my soon-to-be former office like a supplicant. Monica, Whitman's diplomatic training showed, no anger, just calculated pragmatism. We need to discuss transition procedures. Of course, I gestured to my guest chairs. Please, sit. They arranged themselves awkwardly in my small office, 3 executives worth a combined annual compensation of $40 million looking at me like I held the keys to the kingdom. Which, in a way, I did. The board has authorized a new offer, Patterson began. Vice President of International Compliance, 500,000 base, plus bonuses, full reinstatement of your previous authorities plus expanded oversight. That's generous, I said. But I've already accepted Thornfield's offer. We'll match it, Whitman said immediately. Whatever they're offering. It's not about money. I pulled out a file I'd prepared weeks ago, when I first sensed the wind changing. It's about trust and documentation. I spread the papers across my desk, every slight, every dismissal, every time my expertise had been packaged as excess cost. 18 years condensed into a pattern of being valued only in crisis. This is my record at Heliand. Flawless compliance across 37 countries. 0 violations, 0 penalties, until someone decided my knowledge was worth less than his MBA theories. Holt was a mistake, Whitman admitted. We see that now. Do you? I pulled out another document. This is from my performance review 6 months ago. Exceeds expectations in every category. But my raise, 2%. Zachary Holt was hired at twice my salary to supervise work I'd been doing flawlessly for almost 2 decades. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. She'd been part of that compensation committee. We can correct that, Patterson said quickly. Retroactive adjustments. No, I closed the